September 5th, 1963. Evening rush hour on the Ginza Line, the oldest subway in Asia, carrying the workers of a city rebuilding itself into the future. As a train stands at Kyobashi Station, in the tunnel dark beneath the money district, a package left under a seat quietly finishes counting down. The blast tears through the carriage in a flash of white smoke. Windows shatter across the platform. When the haze clears, 10 passengers are down. Commuters, students, a city's ordinary evening shredded in a second. Tokyo has just hosted its first subway bombing, and the man responsible has already told everyone his name. He signed it on letter after letter, mailed to his victims and to the police themselves. Soka Jiro. Ahead lay a name the police could not even pronounce. An envelope delivered to a police station with a live bullet folded inside, and a criminal who quit at the height of his fame for reasons nobody has ever explained. He was never caught. He was never even seen. This is the story of a name without a face. Tokyo, 1962. The fastest growing city in human history. Cranes on every horizon. A bullet train under construction. The Olympics 2 years away. A capital sprinting away from the war at full speed. In that Tokyo, being famous had just become a new kind of dangerous. And no one was more famous than the queen of Japanese popular song. Chiyoko Shimakura's voice was the sound of the era, played in every market street, every radio, every festival. Which is why what arrived at her fan club office on November 4th, 1962 shook the whole entertainment world. A young clerk opened an unmarked, double-sealed envelope addressed to the club, and it exploded in his hands, burning him. In the letters that followed came a signature nobody had ever heard. Soka Jiro. The name itself was a riddle. Even its reading was never settled. The characters could be spoken as Soka or as Kusaka, and it matched no known person and no meaningful place. The police could not even pronounce their suspect, let alone find him. It was deliberately, insultingly ordinary. A name designed to be shouted in every headline and to lead absolutely nowhere. Whoever invented it understood something new. In the age of mass media, a criminal could be a brand. The letters kept coming. Threats and demands aimed at the singer and the people around her. Each one colder and more specific. Police put watchers on post boxes and waited at every place the letters named. No one ever came. The pattern was already visible, and it was disturbing. This man did not actually seem to want the money. He wanted the correspondence. The singer herself never spoke publicly of the letters in those months. Advisors feared feeding the writer exactly the reaction he was farming. Privately, her schedule quietly changed. Side entrances, varied routes, mail screened by other hands. Fame in the boom years came with fan letters by the sackful. Now every sack had to be treated as a minefield, and paper was never the whole of him. Through those winter weeks, small devices began turning up across the city, tucked into a public phone box, planted on the grounds of Asakusa's great temple, left where the crowds passed closest. Some burned, some sputtered. None were accidents. Japan woke up to a new fact. Soka Jiro built bombs, and he was scattering them across the capital like calling cards. Detectives took the device apart and found their first real portrait of the enemy. The construction was compact, disciplined, handmade. The work of someone comfortable with electricity and chemistry, patient with his hands. Not military ordnance, something more unsettling. Hobby shop parts, assembled by a careful mind into something that could kill a stranger politely, by post. And with that, the fear changed shape. A bomb in the mail meant the front door was no longer a boundary. Celebrities hired guards. Companies opened executives' letters with long tweezers behind blast mats. The letters kept arriving anyway. New targets, new demands. The same impossible signature. As if the sender enjoyed watching the whole city learn to flinch. Into the winter, the phantom widened his stage. Threatening letters reached entertainers and businesses. The devices grew bolder, planted, lit, and abandoned. Each one was signed in writing or in method. Each one was survivable. Looking back, investigators would recognize the awful logic Tokyo was being rehearsed on. The movie theaters came next. In the dark of packed cinemas, the great cheap entertainment of the age, devices were slipped under seats. Some fizzled, some burned. Audiences stampeded through smoke into the neon. No one died by luck and by margins of minutes, and the Phantom collected exactly what he seemed to want most: headlines, panic, and the undivided attention of the capital. Put yourself in the police commander's chair that winter. The targets shared nothing. A singer, a fan club man, theaters, firms. The demands were rarely collected. The devices escalated but stopped short of slaughter. Every profile you draw contradicts the last one. Extortionist, arsonist, terrorist, prankster. The file kept growing, and the man inside it kept refusing to be one thing. The letters were the only voice he had, and criminologists have studied that voice ever since. Neat, controlled handwriting. Fluent, almost playful phrasing. He corrected the record when reports got his incidents wrong. He scolded the police for incompetence, and once mailed a police station an envelope with a live bullet folded inside. A signature written in brass. He wrote. One investigator recalled, like a man reviewing the performance of everyone else in his own play. By the spring of 1963, Soka Jiro had become a media creature unlike anything Japan had seen. Weekly magazines ran speculative portraits. Radio hosts read his taunts aloud. Children played phantom and police in the alleys. Somewhere in the crowd of 8 million, a quiet man was reading his own reviews and preparing, in some workshop no one ever found, his finale. The police, meanwhile, were drowning in almost descriptions from theater ushers. Almost matches on handwriting. An entire squadron of detectives assigned to nothing but this one signature. What they never once had in 10 months was a face attached to a deed. A single human being seen planting, mailing, or lighting anything. The Phantom's greatest device was the crowd itself, who taunts a city for the better part of a year without asking for anything he can be caught collecting. The question sat at the center of the investigation like a stone. Extortion with no pickup is not extortion. It is theater, and theater needs an audience, a stage, and escalation. By the autumn of 1963, the Phantom had exhausted every stage but one. The Ginza Line was more than a subway, opened in 1927. It was the proud old artery of the capital. The train businessmen rode under the money district. The line every foreign visitor was shown. In September 1963, with Olympic construction thundering overhead and the eyes of the world already turning toward Tokyo, it was the single most symbolic target in Japan. On September 5th, in the evening rush, a device hidden in a package detonated inside a carriage standing at Kyobashi Station. 10 people were injured, several gravely. The first bombing casualties in the history of the Tokyo subway. Smoke rolled onto the platform. And within days, letters arrived at newspapers claiming the work, in the familiar hand, under the familiar name. Reconstruct the mechanics and the calculation turns colder. The device rode into the station under a seat, timed or triggered to fire in the densest hour. In a steel tube underground where panic has nowhere to go. That no one died was ballistic luck, not mercy. Whatever restraint had governed the rehearsals, the Phantom had just spent it, publicly, underground, at rush hour. Tokyo's reaction was fury, edged with humiliation. The Olympics were 11 months away. The government had promised the world the safest games ever staged, and a signature was setting off bombs under the showcase city. The national police threw everything into the case. A hunt that would eventually consume 19,000 officer deployments and a suspect list 9,600 names long. The injured of Kyobashi disappeared into the statistics of a booming city, but their testimonies shaped the file. None had noticed the package. None had noticed anyone. The device had ridden among them like any parcel in any lap. The perfect camouflage of the ordinary, in the one country on Earth where an unattended bag drew no suspicion at all. That innocence, too, died at Kyobashi, and the Phantom answered the mobilization the only way he ever answered anything. He wrote. He mocked the dragnets. He hinted at more to come. Then, with the entire machinery of Japanese law enforcement pointed at his signature, with his name at the peak of its dark fame, Soka Jiro did the one thing nobody had planned for. He went silent. Silence did not slow the hunt. It fed it. Detectives worked backward through every incident. The mail told them his posting patterns. Boxes scattered across northern and eastern Tokyo, never twice the same. The devices told them his shopping list, batteries, wire, clock parts, chemicals sold in any hardware district. He had built terror from ingredients so ordinary that tracing them meant tracing everyone. The profile hardened at the edges even as the center stayed hollow. A man comfortable with tools and electricity. A tradesman, a technician, perhaps a fireworks man. Literate, orderly, vain about accuracy. Local enough to know theaters and mail routes. Invisible enough to belong there. Thousands of men fit it. Investigators interviewed them by the block, and every interview ended the same way. Nothing you could hold. There were names that lingered in the file. Men whose skills fit, whose movements were never quite accounted for, whose interviews left detectives staring at the door after they had gone. Decades later, retired investigators would admit to private convictions they could never speak aloud. Suspicion is not evidence. In this case, nothing ever was. The handwriting became the case's holy relic. Analysts mapped every stroke of every letter, compared it against seized notebooks, job applications, ration records. The paper trail of a whole city. Close calls flared and died. The Phantom had done something maddeningly simple. He had never written those letters as himself. The hand was practiced, disguised, a costume made of ink. Understand the era to understand the frustration. No cameras on platforms. No fingerprint computers, no databases, card indexes, and shoe leather. Forensics could say what a bomb was made of, but not where its maker slept. 1960s policing was built to catch men who were seen, and Soka Jiro was never seen. The gap between his tools and theirs was the whole case, so the city defended itself instead. Station staff learned to sweep under seats. Theaters checked rows with flashlights between showings. The Olympic security plan quietly absorbed the lessons of Kyobashi, package checks and platform patrols that would outlive the games by decades. The Phantom never struck the Olympics, but the Olympics were guarded, in part against him. The Kyobashi bomb was the last. No more devices, no more letters. The most talked about criminal in Japan withdrew from his own stage at intermission, and the absence became its own mystery. Manhunts know how to chase a man who runs. Nobody quite knew how to chase a man who had simply finished. The theories filled the vacuum. Perhaps he died. Illness, accident, or by his own hand. And his workshop was innocently cleared by relatives who never knew. Perhaps another crime took him inside for something unrelated, and he served quiet years while his legend cooled. Perhaps the subway blood was more than he had bargained for, and the author, horrified by his own third act, burned the script. There is a fourth theory, the one profilers find most plausible and most chilling, that he stopped because he had won. The fame, the fear, the police of the capital dancing to his letters. If attention was the true currency, Soka Jiro retired at the absolute peak of his wealth. Men who stop at the top, the profilers note, are the ones who were always in control. The law kept his account open for 15 years. Detectives rotated off, retired, handed the file to younger men who had been children when the letters ran. In 1978, the statute of limitations on the subway bombing quietly expired. Somewhere, if he was alive, a man in his 50s or 60s read that small newspaper item and became legally no one at all. Retired detectives kept private lists into old age. One kept a copy of the letters in his desk at home, rereading them each September. Another walked the Kyobashi platform every year on the 5th, by his own account, simply to stand there. The Phantom stole no money worth counting. What he took from the men who hunted him was sleep, and decades of it. No deathbed confession ever surfaced. No memoir. No relative's discovery in an attic. No cold case DNA. His devices predate the science that might have named him. The National Police Agency's file on Soka Jiro runs to tens of thousands of pages and contains, at its center, a single provable fact. For 16 months, he existed, and existence was enough to change Japanese crime forever. 20 years later, another Phantom would mail taunting letters under a theatrical alias, feed on headlines and vanish uncaught. The monster with 21 faces, whose story this channel has already told. Investigators on that case studied Soka Jiro like scripture. The monster had a grandfather. Criminologists now file Soka Jiro under a term that did not exist in 1963. Theater crime. The crime committed primarily to be watched. He was Japan's first, the first to grasp that mass media had built a stage on which a nobody with a postbox could co-star with the state. Every taunting alias that followed in Japan and beyond walks through the door he opened. The operational lessons outlived the fear. Transit systems worldwide now assume the package under the seat. Japan assumed it first at Kyobashi. The letters entered forensic textbooks as a masterclass in linguistic disguise, and police learned a humbling grammar lesson. A name is not a lead. You can plaster a signature on every front page in the nation and be no closer to the hand. What separates Soka Jiro from the monsters he inspired is the arithmetic of mercy, or of luck. 10 months, more than a dozen incidents, and not one death. A margin of minutes in the theaters, a margin of inches in that carriage. Whether the Phantom calibrated that restraint or merely gambled with other people's bodies is one more question he never had to answer. In the end, the file holds only his outline. A man of the boom years, clever with his hands, fluent with his pen, invisible in a crowd, who for one long season made the largest city on earth read his mail. He would be over 90 now, almost certainly gone. His workshop long since a parking lot or a convenience store. If anyone ever knew him, they never said. The Metropolitan Police never formally closed the theory work. There was nothing to close it around. No suspect was ever charged, detained, or publicly named. 10 months of terror produced one of the largest investigations of the era, and exactly 0 defendants. In the ledger of Japanese justice, the entry reads the same today as it did in 1963, perpetrator unknown. Kyobashi Station still stands on the Ginza Line, scrubbed and bright, a 30-second stop between the department stores and the office towers. Millions ride past the platform every year. There is no plaque. The commuters checking their phones under the fluorescent light have never heard the name that once made this tunnel the most frightening place in Japan. Somewhere in the city above, in 1963, a careful man packed away his wires and his ink, folded his last letter unsent, and stepped back into the crowd he came from. The crowd kept his secret. It keeps it still. The case remains unsolved to this day.